chapter from history, that is chapter 5, print culture and the modern world. What will be our today's topics? In this chapter, we will look at the development of print from its beginnings in East Asia to its expansion in Europe and in India. We will understand the impact of the spread of technology and consider how social lives and cultures changed with the coming of print. In today's video, we are going to study the first books, print in Japan, print in Europe, Johann Gutenberg, new reading public, and the impact of print, that is religious debates and the fear of print. So why delay? Let's begin with the first one, that is first books. Now, the earliest kind of print technology was developed in China, Japan and Korea. This was a system of hand printing from AD 594 onwards. Books in China were printed by rubbing paper, also invented there, against the inked surface of wood blocks. Now, the method of rubbing the paper against the inked surface is called as wood block printing, right? That's why I have highlighted here. Second one is the book which was printed based on the method of wood block printing is a book called Chinese Accordion. Chinese Accordion is a religious book. Both the sides of the thin porous sheet could not be printed. The traditional Chinese accordion book was folded and stitched at the sides. Now you need some people to write on the mold so that it looks beautiful. So superbly skilled craftsmen, those people who could duplicate with remarkable accuracy, wrote in these wood blocks. The art of writing or beautiful handwriting is called calligraphy. Let's move on to the next point. Now, why did the Chinese need the print? What was the necessity for them to have the print? The imperial state in China was for a very long time the major producer of printed material. Print started in China. China possessed a huge bureaucratic system. They recruited their personnel through civil service examinations. And when you have examinations, you need question papers, textbooks, examination related materials, right? So the textbooks for this examination were printed in vast numbers under the sponsorship of imperial state. That means the Chinese produced the textbooks. From the 16th century, the number of examination candidates went up, thus increasing the volume of print, as the need of the textbooks went up because the candidates attending the examinations also went up. By the 17th century, as urban culture bloomed in China, uses of print got diversified. Print was no longer used by scholars, it was used by merchants. That's the second use of print. They used print in their everyday life as they collected trade information, right? Now, reading increasingly became a leisure activity. The new readership preferred fictional narratives, poetry, autobiographies, anthologies of literary masterpieces, and romantic plays. Now, in China, people who did not know how to read were sitting down, and a person used to narrate the poetry, autobiography, anthology. Normally, it would be a novel. Rich women began to read, and many women began publishing their poetry and plays. Wives of scholar officials published their works. Those who are educated published their own, and the courtesans wrote about their lives. Now, this new reading culture was accompanied by a new technology. Western printing techniques and mechanical presses were imported in the late 19th century as Western powers established their outposts in China. Later, Shanghai became the hub of new print culture, catering to the Western style schools. from hand printing now shifting to the mechanical printing. Now this you can see is Chinese accordion book handwriting, handwritten that is. Now print moves to Japan. Now Buddhist missionaries from China introduced hand printing technology into Japan around 768 to 770 AD. The oldest Japanese book printed in AD 868 is the Buddhist Diamond Sutra. It contains 6 sheets of text and woodcut illustrations. Pictures were printed on textiles, playing cards, and paper money. In medieval Japan, poets, prose writers were regularly publishing their books, which were cheap and abundant because now the method of printing is available. What are the uses there? Printing of visual material led to interesting publishing practices, such as in the late 18th century in the flourishing urban circles at Edo, later known as Tokyo. Illustrated collections of the paintings depicted an elegant urban culture involving artists, courtesans, and tea house gatherings. First would be the painting. Libraries and bookstores were packed with hand-printed material of various types. Books on women, musical instruments, calculations, tea ceremony, flower arrangements, proper etiquette, cooking, and famous places were written. There is a very famous painting, Kitagawa Utamaro, born in Edo in 1753, was widely known for his contribution to an art form called ukiyo. This is an important question for MCQs. What is ukiyo, or who is famous for the ukiyo? Now what happens? For centuries, silk and spices from China flowed into Europe through the Silk Route. In the 11th century, Chinese paper also reached Europe via the same route. Paper made possible the production of manuscripts carefully written by scribes. Scribe are the people who write nicely. Marco Polo was the person in 1295, a great explorer returned to Italy after many years of exploration in China. As you read above, China had already the technology of woodblock printing, so Marco Polo took it back home. Marco Polo brought this knowledge back with him. Now Italians began producing books with woodblocks, and soon the technology spread to other parts of Europe. Now here there is a change. In Europe, luxury editions were still handwritten on very expensive vellum. Vellum is dead parchment of animal. It's a parchment of skin or parchment of dead animal, meant for aristocratic circles and rich monastic libraries, which scoffed at printing books as cheap. If you're printing on paper, it's cheap. If you're printing on vellum, it's really a luxury one. Merchants and students in the university towns bought the cheaper printed copies that's on the book. Now, this is obviously Marco Polo you're seeing here. As the demand for books increased, booksellers all over Europe started exporting books to many different countries. Book fairs were held at different places. Production of handwritten manuscripts was also organized in new ways. Skilled handwriters were no longer solely employed by wealthy and influential patrons, but they are hired by booksellers as well. More than 50 scribes were often worked for one bookseller because the demand for the book is or was improving. Now, what do you mean by manuscripts? Now, the production of handwritten manuscripts could not satisfy the ever increasing demand for books. Why? Because there is a problem. Copying was an expensive, laborious, and time consuming business. These are the limitations of manuscripts. Copying, you have to copy that 1,000 times as per the demand. That was expensive because you have to pay the scribes. Laborious, that means too much boring and time consuming. Manuscripts were fragile. A lot of times they were made from palm tree, awkward to handle, and could not be carried around or read easily. Their circulation therefore remained limited. When the growing demand started, the demand for books, woodblock printing became more and more popular. By the early 15th century, woodblocks were being widely used in Europe to print textiles, playing cards, and religious pictures with simple and brief text. Now, There was clearly a great need for even quicker and cheaper reproduction of text. This could only be done with the new print technology. The breakthrough came when certain Johann Gutenberg developed the first known printing press in the 1430 at Strasbourg, Germany. How did he do it? Gutenberg was the son of a merchant and grew up on a large agricultural estate. He had seen in his childhood how the wine and the olive presses work. Subsequently, he learned the art of polishing stones, became a master goldsmith, and also acquired the expertise to create the lead mold used for making trinkets. Drawing on this knowledge, he developed his own innovation. The olive press provided the model for the printing press, and molds were used for casting the metal types for the letters of the alphabet. Now, what did he do further? In 1448, Gutenberg perfected the system. The first book he printed was the Bible. About 180 copies were printed, and it took 3 years to produce them by the standards of the time. This was very fast production because by that time they were all using the woodblock printing. Printed books at first closely resembled the written manuscripts in appearance and layout. Only thing is the metal letters imitated the ornamental handwriting style. Borders were illuminated by hand with foliage and other patterns, and illustrations were painted. In the books printed for the rich, the space was kept for decoration. Like if you have a book like this, the text, then the border was kept for decoration. You can pick up artist and you can have your own customized version of paint. Each purchaser could choose the design and decide the painting school that would do the illustration. As I mentioned, in the 100 years between 1450 and 1550, printing presses were set up in most parts of Europe. Printers from Germany traveled to other parts seeking work, starting new presses. As number of printing presses grew, book production started to become larger, boomed. The second half of the 15th century saw 20 million copies of printed books flooding the market. The number went up in the 16th century to about 200 million copies. The shift from hand printing to mechanical printing led to the print revolution. What started with woodblock printing from China to Japan to Europe. In Europe, they started using vellum. Then, certain person, Johann Gutenberg, started his own modern printing press. Now, this is the printing press, modern printing press. This is the Bible. This is the explanation for Bible. And this is a printing press. So these pictures are there obviously in the book. I suggest you go and read them. Now comes the print revolution and its impact. What are the impacts of print revolution? Now, what was the print revolution? It was not just a development, a new way of producing books. It transformed the lives of people, changing their relationship to information and knowledge. And with institutions and authorities, it influenced popular perceptions, opened up a new way of looking at things. We'll explore some of them. With the printing press, new reading public emerged. Now, printing reduced the cost of the books. The time and labor required to produce each book came down. Multiple copies could be produced with greater ease now. Books flooded the market, reaching out to an ever-growing readership. Access to books created a new culture of reading. Earlier, reading was restricted to the elite people. Common people lived in a world of oral culture where they would just listen. They heard sacred texts read out, ballads recited, and folk tales narrated. Knowledge was transferred orally, oral people. Now, people started to read, where people collectively heard a story, saw a performance. As you will see in chapter 8, they did not read a book individually and silently. Before the age of print, books were not only expensive but they could not be produced in sufficient numbers. Now, books could reach out to a wider section of people. Now, the public was a hearing public. Now, first in the beginning, now it became a reading public. So, this whole story will tell you how the reading public created. It was a hearing public which was hearing uh, the narration of stories, the recitation of ballads. Now it became a reading public. But the But the transition was not so simple. Books could be read only by the literate people. Yeah, you should know how to read. And the rates of literacy in most European countries were very low till the 20th century. Then what to do? How then could publishers persuade the common people to welcome the printed book? To do this, they had to keep in mind the wider reach of the printed work. Even those who did not read could certainly enjoy listening to the books being read out. So printers began publishing popular ballads, folk tales. Such books would be profusely illustrated with pictures so that they can be sung and recited at gatherings in villages and in taverns, in a tea shop gathering, in a restaurant like that. The oral culture thus entered print, and printed material was orally transmitted. The line that separated the oral and reading culture became blurred, and the hearing public and the reading public became intermingled. Now, another severe thing about this is the religious debates and the fear of print. Now, print created the possibility of wide circulation of ideas and introduced a new world of debate and discussion. Even those who disagreed with established authorities like church and all could now print and circulate their ideas. Through the printed message, they could persuade people to think differently and move them to action. This had significance in different spheres of life. First, people used to blindly believe, now they can publish their ideas, people read their ideas and got enlightened. Not everyone welcomed the printed book, and those who did also had fears about it. Many were apprehensive of the effects that the easier access to the printed world and the wider circulation of the books could have on people's mind. It was feared that if there was no control over what was printed and read, then rebellious and irreligious thoughts might spread. If that happened, the authority of valuable literature would be destroyed, expressed by religious authorities and monarchs, as well as writers and artists. There was an anxiety on the basis of this widespread criticism that printed literature had started to circulate. Now, in 1517, a religious reformer called Martin Luther wrote 95 theses criticizing many of the practices and rituals of the Roman Catholic Church. He printed a copy of this, posted on a church door in Wittenberg. It challenged the church to debate his ideas. Luther's writings were immediately reproduced in vast numbers and read widely. This led to the division within the church and to the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Luther's translation of the New Testament sold 5,000 copies within few weeks, and a second edition appeared within 3 months. Deeply grateful to the print, Luther said printing is the ultimate gift of God and the greatest one. Now, normally in the exam, they will give you this line and tell you to explain. You have to explain what Martin Luther did. Several scholars, in fact, think that print brought about a new intellectual atmosphere and helped spread the new ideas that led to the Reformation. Print and popular religious literature stimulated many distinctive individual interpretations of faith. Even among the little educated working people, in 16th century Menocchio, a miller in Italy, began to read books and were available in his locality. He reinterpreted the message of the Bible and formulated a view of God and creation that enraged the church. First, it was Martin Luther King who questioned the authority of the church. Now, Menocchio, Erasmus started questioning. When the Roman Church began its Inquisition inquiry to repress the heretical, the seditious ideas, Menocchio was hauled up twice and ultimately executed. The Roman Church, troubled by such effects of popular readings and questioning of faith, imposed severe control over publishers and booksellers and started to maintain an index of prohibited books. If your book is questioning the faith of the church, If your book is making you think rationally, then the church started to control the publisher and bookseller, and it maintained an index of prohibited books. It would not let the book get published. Now we have come to the end of part 1 of print culture and the modern world. I'll just summarize you. Print in China, remember accordion and why they started to print, that is for the textbooks for the candidates appearing in the civil service examinations. Print spread to Japan. There you had the Diamond Sutra written and Yukio painted by Utagawa Kitagawa Utamaro. His name is really hard to pronounce. Print in Europe, Marco Polo took it to Italy. Then it was later written in vellum. Then Gutenberg developed his own modern printing press. And the impact, how the reading mania started as a hearing public became the reading public, and the religious fear of print started the church to maintain an index of prohibited books. That's all for today, guys. I hope you have understood the concepts that are taught today, and I hope if you have any questions you will put it in the comment box, and if you have any suggestions also you can put it in the comment box. Till the next part of the video, it's goodbye from me. Take care and have a wonderful day.